Welcome to the 150 year anniversary to the Match Girls protests. Today we're going to actually be talking about the 1888 Match Girls protest that happened in East London and how it impacted the workplace for men and women. Today's host is obviously me, Chris, and my co-host is my partner.
Letixia.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, before we even start, I'm at the end of this podcast. Obviously, I'm going to tell you how you can get involved with the charity and the different ways you can actually get involved. Um, with the charity that we are covering today, the Match Girl Memorial Charity. So let's actually start with the story of the Match Girls. Have you actually heard about the Match Girls, Letitia?
Um, Probably not as much as we're going to cover today. So anything's beneficial.
Yeah. Well, so the Match Girls, I actually started in 1669 when Hanning Brent discovered the source of Fossey jaw. Now, Fossey jaw is a cancer that basically is a cancer that basically. Give me 1 second. Okay, it's a cancer that basically degrades your jaw. So it actually ends up shrinking, and the only way you can keep it from actually killing you is if they actually remove all of your jaw. Now, one
I
of the
was in
things
it
that actually,
actually starts to as in rot away from the inside.
yeah,
Oh,
so they have to take off the whole jaw to keep you alive.
that makes that makes it a horrendous way of living, to be honest. Because with no jaw, how are you gonna
Well,
survive?
you'll be very deformed. Like you'll be,
Chris,
back in the day when people were like, oh, um, somebody will be deformed. You wouldn't want to go to them because they'll be like some kind of superstitious um, idea
no,
about
it's not.
you.
It's not that. It's the fact that it's almost going from one impossibility of living, like one a horrific standard of living, to almost like no living standard at all. Like it'd be rude to say there was one if you don't have a lower jaw to eat your food with. Like you're almost condemned to death if you get pussy jaw. Which seem condemned to do so as a matchmaker at this point.
Mm, that's the funny thing. As soon as the working conditions of with the companies, if they found out that you started having faucet jaw, they'll fire you straight away. So there wouldn't
Why?
be time. They wouldn't because they didn't want the connection between faucet jaw and the company to be apparent. So they will fire you straight away as soon as you start showing any symptoms. You're gone, and they don't want to actually hold responsibility for those things.
So instead of being responsible for the living, they chose to be responsible for the dead. That's wonderful. Sorry, continue.
Hmm. Well, so basically, Hanning Brighton actually discovered white faucet jaw, and he discovered that it was the cause of faucet jaw. White phosphorus. He discovered that it was the cause of faucet jaw. And it was mostly used in factories. Now, you could say that there wasn't much awareness at this point, but in 1852, Charles Dickens actually wrote about the risks of faucet jaw to increase the awareness of white phosphorus. Despite this, one company in particular in East London um, Bryant and May chose to continue to use the white phosphorus, and to be honest, the reason why they chose to keep using white phosphorus over red phosphorus was because white phosphorus was a lot cheaper to use when it came to the matches. Now let's just
I mean,
jump all the way. Go on.
if I'm not mistaken, this is in the times of essentially the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on which one. I'm sorry, I'm not that educated. I'd like to be, but during this, shall we say, time, it was a very big thing to have. If you stood a chance at any kind of business growth, you had to keep your costs as low as you could possibly go. There was very little regulation and law surrounding times like these, and there wasn't as much of an advancement in medicine, if I remember correctly. So they were almost condemned to that fate because the medicine didn't boom at the same time as the Industrial Revolution. It more or less boomed after because more health problems came following suit. So, as in, did they naturally? I can say they exploited people, but who exactly did they exploit?
Well, they exploited people as young as 6 years old and mostly teenage females. So they would basically have them work from 6 days a week and do 12 to 14-hour shifts a day,
Wait,
which is
from
kind of mad.
six?
Yeah,
From
6 years
6 years
old.
old?
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I was doing at 6 years old. Gosh. I mean, the
Remember
kids
back,
of then really paved the way for some of us to have a childhood now.
yeah,
That
yeah.
has to be said, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, don't you know about like all of those nursery rhymes? There was actually a nursery rhyme about a match girl who died outside of a house in the snow. Um, Basically, it was covering these times, and it was basically 6-year-olds going out there in the cold. In fact, orphans going out there in the cold, trying to sell matches to actually pay for their orphanages. And half the time they weren't wearing the right amount of clothing. It'll be freezing outside. People won't pay them any attention, etc. It was a horrible time for kids, and they had no choice but to work because, as you will see later, the pay for people was terrible.
This is all
But
just so sad.
mm,
Sorry, continue.
the workers were paid around 5 shillings per week. However, they did not receive their full pay because of a ridiculous fine system that Brighton and May actually put up. Now, this fine system, when I tell you about it, you're going to laugh. So
I mean, halfway
you
through
get
this
paid.
conversation already, I feel like crying, but we'll go for it. Go on.
So just remember that you get paid 5 shillings per week. It's not per day, per week. Now, they basically have these offenses where if you were to talk, drop matches, or even go to the toilet without permission, they would charge you anywhere between 3 pence to 1 shilling.
Okay, right, hold on. If I'm not mistaken, a shilling is 12 pence. The three
Mm-hmm.
pence is a quarter shilling. Um, I can't quite remember how many shillings in a pound. Oh,
Okay, so shillings. Let me actually think about it. So it was 1 pound was a divided into 20 shillings. Yeah. and then 1 shilling was divided into 12 pennies. So you
Oh
weren't
my
even
gosh,
getting
wait.
paid.
So if you actually ended up with like I'm not sure, a fine every day,
Hmm.
you'd get no pay at the end of the week.
Yep.
That's just in like
You'll actually
sorry,
end up owing the company money at that point.
for basic human needs.
Yeah. And that's not even the worst part. So you're getting charged what, 3 pence or to one shilling. Okay. Now the workers also started work at 6:30 a.m. in the summer and around 8 o'clock a.m. in the winter. And they actually finished work at 6 p.m. around 6 p.m. Now, if the workers were late, guess how much of their pay they would lose for that week?
The whole week? No?
They won't lose. On top of the fines, they would lose half of their pay. So
Half a
you've already
shilling.
got no
Okay.
half of the 5 shillings you would get for that week.
That's that's worse than the maximum fine.
Yes, yes. So it'll be 2.5 shillings, which is sad, especially if you
Sorry, I'm
actually
sorry. Like it's
consider.
actually so sad.
Mm, if you actually consider how much a normal person would actually have
Do
to
you know
actually
what I think it
survive.
is that bothers me is like how much it would have taken in those days to actually buy, like, to actually live as is, let alone pay for rent out of half a day's pay for
Oh,
consecutively 4 weeks, somehow pay for a month's worth of rent. I mean, at this point, you'd be lucky to even buy bread. But that's like rent, clothing, like the basic necessities of life, shelter, warmth, food. Oh, wow, food. Sorry, water. What else? I didn't say it was in it.
okay. I actually have those numbers. So let's actually, okay, so you said rent. Now, for a normal clerk, a senior clerk, in 1944, they would have to pay 25 pounds for
I'm
rent.
sorry, £25.
Yes, 25 pounds for rent.
So how many shillings are in a
And
pound?
20,
I'm sorry,
20 shillings.
25 shillings for rent.
No, 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 no. 20 pounds for rent.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you
20
you're
pounds. Hold
already
on,
getting
wait a
it.
second. Wait. £20 versus 20 shillings in a pound.
Yes.
Isn't that like 4,000 shillings, or am I like incapable of maths right now?
Um, I think so. I'm not quite sure. So whoever can do the maths can do the maths.
No, so
As
like to
much as
pay a
I.
month's worth of rent, hold on. To pay a month's worth of rent, even with the
Hmm,
basic of 5 shillings a week, you'd have to be
hmm.
working for longer than a year to be able to afford 1 month's rent. I'm sorry, what?
Now do you see? Now do you see why your children to work even as young as 5? Imagine. So think of
I
it
mean,
this
not
way.
my children, but thank you.
No, obviously not. I'm talking about back then. At that point, you would have you, the wife, your daughter, and probably another younger daughter or cousin, whoever's living with you, working here to make 5 shillings each a week. So that's 25 shillings a
Amongst all of
month
you.
each.
This kind of
No, each. 25,
No,
25
no, no,
shillings.
no.
So five,
Each over the duration of a month is what I'm saying.
yeah, around 25 to 20 shillings over the duration of a month.
And they hold on, wait, sorry. So they hired children as young as 6, that kind of, but that's not stretched to whether they wanted male or female. But I'm sure you said that they wanted, or they hired teenage females.
They are
Why was that?
mostly they mostly hired females because males had like they would usually work in much more heavier industries. So like fishing, factory work. The boys back then were doing they were working in like factory machinery.
Oh, so much more
So
strenuous work.
yes, and much more dangerous work. Much more dangerous work as well.
Mm.
So it's kind
So
of it.
on top of not being able to afford to live, you then had
Mhm.
the potential of potentially dying because you were trying to afford to live.
Yes, yes.
That's god awful
It's
because that means that you're like only. I mean, I guess by today's like level of how we measure stress, isn't it? Through mental health and whatnot. Does that mean the
mm,
suicide rate at that point was quite high, alongside like the mortality rate then?
yeah. For children, the mortality the for children they died. They had a low mortality rate, but a really high mortality rate. But for adults, on the other hand, if the work didn't kill you, you were either going to drink yourself to death or you were going to die from catching some kind of disease, or you were just going to commit suicide. In fact, a large number of everyday working men, because they didn't have the money to support a family, they ended up they ended up committing suicide, which and in this day and age for this to be happening is I'm glad. I'm gonna say this earlier on. I'm glad that these girls actually done this protest. As you're gonna see later on, as we go along, you're gonna see that they actually changed quite a bit.
So, what
Um,
exactly happened in the protest then? Like, how did that come to
so
be?
okay, so in in on June of 1888, um, the there was a meeting held by the Fabin Society, and it was basically about they held the meeting um, for the status of female laborers at the time. So the leader Henry Hyde Champion pointed out that Brighton and May's shareholders were actually taking 20% of dividends, and they didn't actually pay, and despite having the ability to take 20% dividends, they didn't actually pay fair wages to their workers. So Henry Champion proposed a boycott of Brighton and May matches, and it was passed anonymously. Now, what actually began the protest even
I'm
more
so confused.
moved
How do you manage to do a boycott anonymously? I'm so sorry. I don't
anonym,
understand how that works.
anonym, anonymously. So
Yeah,
anonymously, the word means
no, I know what that means. I'm saying,
everyone.
how do you manage to boycott a brand anonymously?
Anonymously.
Yeah,
No,
everyone
no,
talks
not anonymously, anonymously.
unanimously
Yes,
all together.
unanimously.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
you,
I'm sorry. Continue.
yeah. Okay, okay. So the thing that
My
actually
apologies.
brought it's all right. The thing that actually pushed the actual protest to happen is Anna Bassett, who was at that society meeting, and Herbert Browse. Basically, they approached workers. They approached
Hold on, give me a
workers at
moment.
Brighton.
You mean Anne Besant, Herbert Burrows, and if you give me a second, the Fabian Society. Oh,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
continue.
The Brighton and May workers outside they actually approached the Brighton and May workers outside of the factory gates, and they asked the workers, the Match Girl workers, about their experience working there. Now the workers were obviously honest. They told them the conditions that they were working in was poor, and that they had long hours and fines and low pay. Now the thing that knocked it out of the park was the fact that they also, on top of everything else, they also had to deal with the risk of faucet as they used to eat. They used to basically come into work, do their work, sit down, eat there at the workplace, right next to this material, this very hazardous material, and they would inhale it, and they would get like bleeding from the lungs. Um, they would even get basically their motor functions will go all weird, their teeth will fall out, etc. Like I told you before, this procedure was not a joke. Now, what Anna Besant did was because
Hold
she
on,
owned
just
she
to clarify. So
gone.
I'm just envisioning this. So as a woman or a teenage girl, you've then had to watch your siblings go to work. Go like
Mm-hmm,
essentially. I'm just thinking about it realistically. If I was a
mm,
teen and I have siblings, we're all going to work at the same factory. If one of us doesn't
yeah.
commit suicide, someone's going to die from fossil jaw,
Mm-hmm,
and I've got to watch them die every day. I come home.
yep. Yep. Yeah. This is mad,
That's like
right?
watching, literally watching them grow. Aside, like on top of having your as a kid, like I feel like one thing we seem to especially take for granted is the fact that we actually are able to spend time with others. That kind of lifestyle,
Mm,
there's no way to spend time with others. You'll be exhausted. Not to mention match making, because this is we're talking about the industrial revolution. It's quite delicate work, if I'm not mistaken, which sounds like why they would hire women and children as well. Meaning
mm,
that is in no way, shape, or form like ergonomically friendly. You are going home exhausted, going home probably feeling ill, and then on top of that, you're depressed, and then on top of that, you're just waiting. It's like you're waiting for death every day that you live.
yeah. Yeah. That's basically it. It's it's really this story is a really sad story when you actually take into account all the things that have happened. Now, the only time that things started changing for these match girls was like I said, Anne Besant. She ran a weekly magazine called The Link. Now, after her interview with the workers at the match at the Bryant and May factories, she actually wrote a paper, a segment for it, in on the 23rd of June in 1888. This paper actually complained about the way that the women were being treated at Brighton and May. The company after this paper was released, guess what the company actually did?
Well, they don't sound like the kind of business that's just going to go, okay, guys, here's a pay rise. I don't know. They fired them all?
Oh, no, 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 no.
Oh my gosh, at this
Now,
point, that would have been more humane.
yes, yes, it would have been more humane, but the company thought, oh, there's an article out there saying that we basically, how about if we save the company's image by forcing our workers to sign a statement which stated that they were happy with the working conditions?
I'm sorry, wait.
Now,
No,
go.
wait. So this is a 1800s. Sorry, this is 1888, right? Just
Yeah.
to make sure I've got like my timeline correct. 1800s edition of a non-disclosure agreement. Way to go.
Yeah. Well, the difference between then and now is that um well, you didn't have like a proper organized union to fall back on if this were to happen. So this is the bit that actually gets me. So they were forcing their workers, but then when a group of workers decided to band together and actually refuse to sign the statement, Brighton and May, Brighton and May actually sacked the leader of the group. And this is the moment where you go, oh no, what happened next? Because at this point, the workers were fed up. So they basically, I think around 1,400 workers literally stood up and left. The strike began at this moment. And later on, William Stead, the editor of the Pall Mall Glass, gl, pardon
Hold on a minute.
my speech impediment.
Gazette.
Gazette, yeah. The Pall Mall Gazette. Henry Champion of the leader elect, basically Labour elect. He was actually the leader of the Labour elect, and Catherine Booth of the Salvation Army joined Bassett in her campaign for better working conditions in factories. However, other papers such as the Times blamed Bassett and others others socialists basically they painted Bassett as if she was trying to radicalize this movement, as if it wasn't being done proper.
They tried to trivialize it as if it was meaningless, essentially. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, yeah. They tried to trivialize it as if it was meaningless, like they were getting upset over nothing. Now, the Times was quoted writing this. The petty is that the match girls have not been have not been suffered to take their own course, but have been egged on to strike by irresponsible advisor. No effort has been spared by those pests of the modern industrialist world to bring this quarrel to a head. Quarrel to a head.
So they basically didn't think it was because they were sick of being treated. The way they were being treated, they basically tried to point the finger at someone else.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is the media kind of supporting poor labor. Poor labor is a bit of an understatement, but like dreadful
they were,
labor.
like I said,
Why?
the media back then had an agenda. Obviously, they couldn't attack the people that would pay for their papers, would they? The poor weren't paying for the papers. They didn't have enough money. But the rich, on the other hand, they were paying they were paying for the papers. They were
So
the
they tried
only
to
reason why
dramatize
papers
it.
existed. They tried to take a different stance. They took the idea of the actual protest. The leader was leading these women. They were leading these women astray. So they weren't. It wasn't a valid argument that they were having with Brighton and May.
Hmm.
So I mean, if you think about it, for you, what kind of what doesn't this situation actually remind you of anything that's happened in the last couple of years?
I know a lot of teachers have gone on strike. I know a lot of TFL workers have gone on strike. A
Yeah,
lot of
let's talk about
lecturers
the
actually recently have gone on strike as well.
let's talk about
Sorry,
the
you were saying?
TFL. Let's talk about the TFL workers. Now, the TFL workers, I'm not going to say that it's equal to what these women were going through, but they have the hardest working working experience right now. Not only that you have rude customers, you have long hours, and you basically get paid slightly above living wage. But you also have to deal with the fact that over the time, the the TFL the TFL has taken advantage of these workers. One of the things that I found was funny that when they actually go, oh, on the applications, they go, oh, workable hours or sociable hours. When it's in actual fact, you're not getting sociable hours, you're getting unsociable hours.
Yeah.
So in terms of like, if for them, if it was back then, if they were actually working in the TFL back then, and if the TFL actually existed back then, the situation would be like this. They would have to put up with everything. They wouldn't have a way to be like, oh, I am. They wouldn't have a way to be like, oh yeah, I am going to stay here and take this crap. I mean, I'm going to go out and actually go and strike.
Willingly accept these rights.
Yeah, they it's just not possible if they were there. But now that they live in that the TFL is in this era, they had the opportunity to go, you know what? You're not paying us what we think we are worth. You're not giving us respect. Let's see who's going to drive these buses. What happened? They ended up getting paid more. They actually ended up getting better treatment. Even though the the people themselves don't change. So you still get rude passengers, but at least you have much less harder work environment where you don't have to work these many hours. You get paid at least a decent amount of money for that hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so the protesters also decided to form a Match Girls union, and Bassett agreed to become its leader. The company also announced that it was willing to reemploy the workers that were dismissed and would also bring an end to the fine system.
Okay,
This
so
was a win.
all of this started in 1669. We're now in
Yes.
1888.
Yes.
Um, I'm sorry, we had almost over actually 220 almost 220 years worth of. Gosh.
220 years. No, okay, so in 1669, all of this
Was
was
the
brought
discovery of
was
fossil jaw.
yeah. So fossil jaw was a problem that people were aware of all the way from
Okay, hold on.
1669.
So, hold on, sorry. Because I'm trying to work my way towards asking you a question just to make sure that I'm actually paying attention correctly.
Okay, go
So the
on.
protest started in 1669 with the
No,
discovery of
no.
fossil jaw.
The discovery of fossil jaw was in
Was in
1669.
16. Okay, so
Okay.
it wasn't linked to. Sorry, it wasn't the fossil jaw itself wasn't distinctly linked to matchmaking until Charles Dickens
No,
acknowledged
no,
it in 1852.
no. In 1669, it was discovered that white phosphorus caused fossil jaw.
So it was known for over 200 years.
Yes, it was known that white
Distinctly
phosphorus.
known.
Yep, and back then it was also used in 1669. It was also used to make matches in factories, but they were unaware at that time.
They were
But
unaware,
then,
you mean, before
yeah,
1669.
yeah,
Now I'm
they were
saying for the
unaware
time
before
in which they were
1669.
aware, sorry, for the
Mm,
time in which they would have been aware, it took
mm.
219 years to see even a remote change. I mean, I'm sorry, I really don't think that them being willing to re-employ people, and I'm sorry, I think that they were no longer bound to eating in the same room as the phosphorus. That's of it. For all of that, to have gone through all of that, it seems so little to me. I'm not sure why. It seems so little.
Yeah, well, the Match Girls situation didn't end just when the Match Girls Union was made. It continued on. It continued. They continued. This whole protest lasted around 3 weeks.
Sorry, the
The
strike
prot,
lasted 3 weeks.
yeah, literally all of this has is in within the space of 3 weeks, and
So from the
just
point of the
because.
interview, from the point
Mm,
of like the interview to the
mm,
article to the Match
mm,
Girls Union to the
mm,
strike, the end of the strike was all in 3 weeks.
mm-hmm. Like these women, as much you can see how hard they work. So imagine how hard they were working for these factories. They
I think it's
changed.
just that like it almost makes me sad to have to acknowledge things like this as a woman, because as much as we have our battles as women, this should never have had to be a like they were purposely exploited for being essentially vulnerable. And it's not
Yeah,
just the work. Like I understand that the work required nimble fingers. Still get men or boys born with like nimble fingers.
mm,
It just seems so almost intentional. I don't know.
yeah,
It makes me quite grateful that like um even though there were many children's lives lost, there are children here today that will never have to see a day's worth of work as a child. As a child, children of today get the opportunity of a childhood because kids back then gave up theirs.
yeah,
Sad to say, but like the least we can do is actually be, grateful. Or even our children at this point, like as well. Like I
yeah.
could never imagine like watching anyone. I couldn't imagine as a parent watching your child die in front of your very eyes. and every time you see them, you know why.
Yeah,
So
at this point, it's like, to be honest, even when the match girls actually won, they only won in these categories. So the company actually agreed to rehire the women that were fired. And they also ended the fine system and allowed the workers to, and also allowed the workers to eat in separate rooms away from the white phosphorus. But they continued using the white phosphorus. Brighton and May, in particular, continued to use the white phosphorus all the way until 1901.
so because they weren't killing
When
off enough people, they still continue to use it. What kind of logic is that? Sorry,
and
continue.
that was the same time that white phosphorus actually became illegal. So it wasn't that they wanted to; it's more like they were forced to.
What do you mean they were forced to use white phosphorus?
They were forced to stop using white phosphorus to actually start using red phosphorus in 1901. Basically, their public image was damaged to the point where they had nothing to keep them from actually. They had nothing. They were losing sales. They were literally, people were boycotting them continuously.
I mean,
It was
it baffles me that they really didn't see the point in from 1888. That's what 12, 13 years. I, I, I don't know. I'm a little bit blown as to how long it takes to develop a match formula.
um basically within a day you can make a couple hundred matches. Each individual person can make a couple hundred matches. Now, the way that they made it was they would put the phosphorus around the stick, so it was a like a I think a I think over 60 centimeters matches. They will wrap around the phosphorus on either side, and then they'll put it in a machine and chop it in
Oh
half.
my.
So that made two different matches. So a couple hundred they'll be able to make within a couple hours, technically. Now, yeah, it's the match girls. The way the Brighton basically screwed up was the fact that the match girls actually started their own company originally that actually used red phosphorus, and they also hired the old women that were fired, the women that were fired, and they basically worked there, and they sold, and because people weren't buying from Brighton and May, they were going to other companies, and most of Brighton and May's sales went to the Match Girls company that they made. Later on, though, Brighton and May, when they actually gave in and wanted to give the women a fairer work environment, they ended up buying the Match Girls company, the Match Girls factories, uh,
But
into
who
them.
allowed that to
They ended up
happen?
buying it. At this point, the fight was bigger than the Match Girls. At this point, Anna Bassett actually, once the Match Girls protest ended, Anna Bassett actually continued to fight for women's rights and children's rights for quite a while. She changed quite a lot. Now, straight after the Match Girls protest, there was another protest, but it was to do with the Match Girls um, partners, so their husbands. This protest was to do with the fishery and the way that they were being treated and how much they were getting paid. So the Match Girls protest actually inspired the 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 men to protest against their their um their people, the people that actually hire them for better working wages, better conditions, and works security, which sparked. It didn't just happen here in London. It sparked a light that went past London. It went all the way across the country. This one action created other unions, and those unions also helped others create more unions, and then so on until today's standards of working
I
is
mean,
now
when
a
you think about
staple.
it, it's reformed workers' rights. Their
Mm,
experience essentially reformed medicine,
hmm
and it built like a, how do I say, it actually forced people to be accountable for the workers that they had, who they were actually responsible for. On top of,
Yeah,
Anne Besant and the work that she did as a female and social activist, if I remember that correctly. I'm
yeah,
not quite sure what she would have been called back then, but I know in today's terminology she would have been called that.
yeah,
So after
yeah.
all of that, today we have labour rights, employment law, even a contractual law as well,
Mm-hmm.
schooling, medicine, safe engineering. So we couldn't forget that in that industrial era. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so much that we actually have today, because that would have then as well led to more technological development, because we now, as much as we can, try and stay away from any kind of manual labor unless it's actually demanded or it hasn't like been changed. Because obviously I know that a lot of warehouses still use manual labor, but not to the
Mm-hmm.
degree of obviously a workhouse or
Yeah,
matchmaking factory, for example. But that's a lot to be literally thankful for even today.
yeah. But do you want to know the funny thing is, yeah,
Hmm.
the Match Girls had such a huge impact in the culture of working, but you don't hear about it in schools, and you don't. There is literally no statues about the women that were a part of the protests. There is no. There was barely any information out there that actually talks about this. In my research, do you want to know how many videos I actually found? I actually found about the Match Girls, the 1888 Match Girls.
Go on.
I only found three
Wait,
videos exploring this.
so you're telling me that they essentially got, well, I mean, I don't mean that bluntly, but they were completely forgotten. Despite
Yeah,
all of what they did, they were completely forgotten.
yep,
That's this awful, because I know that we actually have a commemorative statue for the women that fought for women's voting rights. I think that
yeah,
labor rights had the same weight, no?
yeah. That's what you
I'm
would
so
think,
confused.
but
How can that be not acknowledged today when it was just as impactful?
I think it's because if you look at the if you don't look at the context of the whole picture, you only see women fighting one company. These women were fighting this one company, and that's all you see. Now, when you actually look at the bigger picture, the impact that they actually had across all the different planes of work, these women took it to like inspired so many different things, the way that things work, etc. So yeah, if you didn't look at the context, you'll literally be like, yeah, it's a story about women that went to protest. That's it. when this I think it should be an educational thing. It should be we have Women's Month. Come on, Women's Month. Like they do in for Black History Month. Give them give a with that month, Women's Month, you should at least have these untold stories about great and powerful women who achieved and changed the world that we live in. At least that. But we none of that happens here. And that's what the charity is trying to do. The
Naturally. I mean,
major
that does make sense.
the major purpose of the charity is to memorialize the match girls, and by memorize the match girls by getting public statues honoring them for their contributions to the formation of the new unionized um, unionized countries, and spreading awareness through education gatherings, and also community events, and much more overall. They basically they actually done a challenge last year. Basically,
Okay.
they had a bunch of little girls come in, and they basically wrote poems about the actual Match Girls project, and the winner got, I can't remember, the winner got to go to, I think it was the Chambers.
Wait, so this factory, does it still exist?
Yes, today. It's in East London. You can literally go there today.
So you can visit it. It wasn't like destroyed or anything. It's
It
actually
wasn't
considered a
destroyed.
historical monument, isn't it? If it's over, I think, 50 or 60 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I may actually be wrong, but gosh, of all the things that is left over, it's almost sad that the factory of horror stories is what left.
It's over 200 years. It's over 200 years old. It's still there. The factory is still, I think, is still owned by Brighton and May, if I'm not. Yeah, I think they're
They're
still
still
owned by
around.
Brighton and May. Yeah.
I'm surprised. Surprised there's still got any legs left at this point. Unless it's a
They're
different
still
Brighton
around. I can actually check. Brighton and May actually, yeah, it's still around, but yeah, they're still around. You can buy their matches. They're still doing matches. That's the funny thing.
It's
They
this funny thing is like we don't really consider matches anymore until barbecues and campfires, until very, very special moments. They're not as widely used. I remember, I'm not old enough to remember it, but I know back
mm,
then, before we had electric lighters, the
mm,
way for you to, your gas stove, your matches, your candles, your oil lamps as well, candles, and matches, sorry, you'd use for those. Matches that you'd use for smoking, actually.
yeah.
They were very, very widely used. And it's almost
Nowadays,
like since then, it's like died.
I mean, matches are still being used today for
Oh,
things
I'm
like
not saying that they're not still being used. I'm saying they're not being used as um, inherently
as what? Yeah, because you have
as what
things
we
like
used to use them
lighters
for.
and yeah, it's, they're still around. Um, but yeah, as I said at the beginning of this actual podcast, that we will be giving you information to do with that, how to actually get involved with a charity. If anyone is interested, all you have to do is just go to www.matchgirls.org, one one 1888.org, and there you can find any information that you would like. You can They do give you the options to donate, actually get involved with the charity directly, and if you have any ties to the actual match girls, for example, they were your great 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 grandmother, or your great great grandmother had a I don't know if they're your
Oh, I
actual
was it as if
ancestors.
you mean if you are a descendant of their families
Yes,
rather.
if you are a descendant of their families, then they would like to actually hear your story. And one of the things that I would, if you do not have the time or the money to actually support this charity, I would love it if you were to just spread the word, share the website, share this podcast, do what you can, and spread the word out there so that more people know about about these women. They know about how far these women went and how much they achieved that isn't being covered today in our education system, or even in parliament, or this isn't
Modern
covered
day
anywhere.
media anymore.
Yeah, they literally, this event is 150 years. 150 years ago. Its anniversary is this year. So if you have to, spread it on your social media. If you can, spread it on your social media, send it to your friends. Just just give some awareness to this charity, because they really, really need it to get this story out there, these great women and what they achieved. If you want to know more about the event, they have extensive information on their website. Extensive, even testimonies from actual living descendants at this moment. But yeah, I am happy to say we are done for the day. Letitia, have you got anything to say?
No, but thank you for having me here today. It's been very educational.
No problem. Um, Remember, guys, share this story, and thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.